audit care and much else. And in the case of Sir Robin Wales, leader of Newham Council for many, many years. What is particularly interesting about these men is that Newham became the most popular council in the country with an approval rating of 80% by 2018. Extraordinary numbers. They also managed to freeze council tax from 2008 to 2018, which, if you think about that, at a time when central government was giving out less money, is an astonishing achievement. And those of you in the press corps that have heard me say this before, it bears repetition that in some ways our weakness as a party is not having people who have been on the front line, managed budgets, run government at all levels. And today makes a significant step forwards for us in that direction. Sir Robin, who will speak in a moment, will become our London Director of Local Government, and we're looking forward to his experience. And Clive is going to be our mayoral candidate in the contest coming up in Newham. So without further ado, Sir Robin, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Right. OK, just to introduce myself again, because it's in my speech, and even though Nigel's very kindly introduced me, I was leader of Newham Council for 6.5 years, and then I was the executive mayor for 16 years. I was the first ever Labour directly elected mayor. You'll remember Ken Livingstone was elected, but he was elected as independent. So in the end, I beat him. It used to annoy him. And I'm here to explain basically why we've left the Labour Party and why we've joined Reform. And Clive is going to say something about some of the other reasons why we did it. We've tried to go in our speech. If we say the same thing twice, I apologise for wasting your time. So we came to the conclusion that the old parties can't deliver services, and the result of not delivering services is cynicism in the electorate. We promise, and then nothing happens. Now, the Tories did that to excess. They promised and promised, and nothing happened. They failed to deliver all the things they said they would do. And then the Labour government came, and we thought, here we are, Keir Starmer's going to do things brilliantly, it's going to be different. I wasn't convinced. So what have we done since then? We're going to stop the illegal boats, but we can't even send a warship to Cyprus. Never mind stopping the illegal boats. The Labour government said we'll build 300,000 homes a year. Not a chance. Not a chance, and never was a chance. And the result is rents will go up, and people who are currently suffering with high rents are going to suffer even further in the private sector. The NHS, they pour billions down it, and nothing happens. And one of our contentions is that we've forgotten how to deliver services, and that delivering services is how we will connect with the British people and stop the cynicism that's going on there. But it's worse. In the NHS, Labour's lost its moral compass. Not only have they decided to cut waiting lists, they've gone to the waiting list and said, where are the people who shouldn't be on the waiting list? We'll take them off, and then we can say we've cut the waiting list. That is immoral. And then, and I know they've gone back on this, they're going to experiment on children. Experimenting on children is not something that the Labour Party should ever have done or been doing. They've lost the moral compass for us. But they aren't just bad at what they're delivering, it's also damaging. You take the universities and the vast expansion, the premium from that is falling. They're scamming kids on the debt that they've got. And actually what we didn't realise was that they'd end up large number of kids doing pointless courses with fourth-rate lecturers brainwashing them into a view that says this country isn't a good country. Well, we both think, and I guess the other people, I guess Nigel and Leila think, this is a country to be proud of with a proud record. Now, John Curtis said something really interesting recently, and I hope you all looked at it because you'll be political journalists. It's very important. He said there's still left-right, but actually there's another thing now. Social liberals and social conservatives, what you might call lazily woke, well, we'd argue it's social illiberals. And one of the things Clive and I believe passionately in is Enlightenment values. We believe in the idea of empiricism, the idea of free speech. Free speech is not violence. We think that rational thought is how we should govern ourselves. That's being thrown out the window at a great rate of knots. So you look at the rise in anti-Semitism in this country, which is an absolute scandal. The government, the Labour government, is trying to enforce a blasphemy law on people who burn Qurans. I think it's a stupid thing to do, by the way, but it's people's right to do that. So they're trying to enforce a blasphemy law. The women, 4 Women Scotland, who went and won a court order, won at the Supreme Court, and Bridget Phillipson still hasn't come out and said, you know, women have rights too. And I think it's portrayed as a tragedy. It's not. It's a women's rights issue. And I would be remiss if I didn't say I think those of us who are feminists and support the feminist cause have to stand by those women. And then, of course, the rape gang cover-up. And it's one of the interesting things that this was pointed out earlier by Reform. And why is there two things are happening with that rape gang cover-up? One is covered up on the basis that you mustn't upset the community. Nonsense. Most Muslims are appalled at what went on. But you mustn't upset the community. And secondly, it exposed, as Gorton did, the transactional relationship between reactionary Muslims and those who want to get their votes and have them turned out. And be clear, I represented a borough that was a third Muslim. And 80% satisfaction, clearly those Muslims thought we were doing a good job because we thought they were important, but we didn't talk them through the mosques. We didn't do that. We talked them direct because we think that's how British politics should work. So then I come to one last thing I was going to say. The budget deficit, as we keep banging up our budget deficit, we don't have the capacity to do any of the things that we ought to be doing or the things we ought to try and do. And I think that is giving our children problems in the future. They'll have to make the cuts that this government hasn't got the courage to do. And one last thing, in terms of cuts, if you look at the most damaging thing, you've got a situation where their benefits can't be cut, so it's better not to work. And I'm going to quote you Clause 4 of the Labour Party. Have you read Clause 4 of the Labour Party? The new one that Blair brought in? It says, one of the bit, to create for each of us the means to realise our true potential. Well, that means work. And if you stop people working, they're not realising their true potential. And again, the Labour Party sacrificed the things that actually stood for. That's what we think. We stand where we always stood. They don't stand anywhere anymore. So, why reform? Well, I have to say, the idea of the Greens, which is just Labour on steroids or whatever drug they've decided to legalise this month, is absolute nonsense. It's dangerous and it's evil. Now, we looked at it, we thought, well, of course, reform's racist, isn't it? Oh, we all know it's racist. And why is it racist? Because actually reform are raising the issues people are addressing today earlier than anybody else. And when the woke get going, they keep labelling and labelling and labelling. If I thought reform was racist, if Clive thought reform was racist, we wouldn't be in this room or even near this headquarters. It's not. And I challenge anybody to show how it is. I can show you some other parties that are racist. I can show you parties that are anti-Semitic. I can show you parties that have been told they're institutionally racist. I can show you that. But I don't believe, and I'm happy to have this debate at any point, that reform is in any way racist. But what it is doing is standing against the liberal values that people are trying to bring into our country. It discusses issues other people won't discuss. Gorton was interesting. You got people vote. We know they voted for families. They do that. They've been doing that for ages. But it's a secret ballot. It's the ballots at home that actually cause the big problem. And I would just remind you that the Chartists, we were discussing this in 1848, said one of the things we should have is a secret ballot. And when you throw that away, you throw away our democracy, I have to say. And the other thing was, of course, the Baranari clan voting, which is not the way we think our politics should be going. So, we thought reform, it's got a lot of rough edges, but we think there's an opportunity to transform our society. There's going to be a number of reform councils, and we're going to work, Clive and I, with those councils to try to deliver the services that people need and deserve and deliver them at cost. Because the money you raise in tax isn't your money. When I see stuff saying Sadiq Khan is paying money, it's on all the posters, is giving money. No, he's not. He's taking money from somebody to give it to somebody else. Sometimes that's a good thing. I'm a social democrat. I'm not against that. But it needs to be money that's well spent. And that's the problem we've got with our society today. So we're going to work with councillors, we're going to see what we can do. And what I'd now like to do, I'm going to hand over to Clive. And I just say on Clive, he has a very impressive record of public service before he was ever a councillor or anything. He's a colleague and a friend. And he was co-councillor with me for 4 years in a seat. So it was quite fun. He's a key player in what we did in Newham. And I'll just remind you, 80% satisfaction, no increase in council tax, no cuts, biggest employment project in the country, teaching every kid to play a musical instrument, all sorts of things we did, but no cuts, yet we were able to do it without increasing tax. Clive was a key player in that, and one more thing he did, which he's a bit embarrassed about, he delivered stuff working with the NHS. I think he's the only person in this country that's managed to work with the NHS to deliver stuff. So, Clive.
Short sentence that it's very, very difficult for any member of the Labour Party to say, I love this country. I do. It's given me everything. I love what it has been. I love what it can be. This is a place where I live and I choose to live. I want it to be better. And that's why I have decided, if I may make the reference back to Theodore Roosevelt, to rejoin the men in the arena. Come off the sidelines, but to join those in the arena who are willing to get their hands dirty and take up the fight. Well, as you know, I'm Clive Furnes, and I will be standing as Reform's candidate for the Mayor of Newham. I joined the Labour Party when I was 21, and that was a long time ago. I went on to serve for 21 years as a Labour councillor in Newham, and that's where I've had my home for the best part of 50 years. Now, it would be an exaggeration to say that I enjoyed my entire time as a Labour councillor. But I felt we achieved something, and I felt that it was worthwhile. But it took its emotional cost, and I was hesitant about returning to the fray. But in the 8 years since I left the council, the Labour Party has become unrecognisable from the party I joined as a young man. I joined a party that represented working people and which was inspired by the principles of the Enlightenment. Chief among these were freedom of expression and freedom of thought. These principles are under assault today. The CPS under Labour seems intent on reintroducing a crime of blasphemy, albeit by the back door. As Robin mentioned, a man cleared by the Court of Appeal of giving offence has been hounded by the CPS. His words and actions offended someone. Meanwhile, the man who attacked him with a knife, which would attract a tariff of something like 4 years in prison, was given a suspended sentence. A teacher from Batley remains in hiding because the government cannot or will not protect him from religious bigots intent on violence. There is a sense in which the government has surrendered to mob rule. Across the country and in Newham, I see people dividing on the basis of I see people dividing on the basis of ethnicity and religion. It's no exaggeration to speak of the balkanisation of Britain. That is not the land I want to live in. Labour's response has been to appease the most reactionary parts of our society. Labour also continues to have problems with anti-Semitism. In Newham, in the last 2 terms, 4 members of Newham Council who published anti-Semitic comments have either been suspended or deselected. And the most egregious one was one who was foolish enough to publish her admiration of Adolf Hitler and his innovative solution to the Jewish problem. She put that on Facebook. But she'd served 4 years as a Labour councillor before that was revealed. In 2 of the last 3 elections, Labour has been more popular amongst those earning more than £70,000 a year than amongst those in classes C1 to E. Labour has abandoned its core principles and it's abandoned the working class. We might reasonably ask, what is it there for? There are 2 candidates in Newham who've already declared for the May election. Both have published their outline programmes. Not only do they look similar to one another, but they both look similar to the programme that Robin ran 8 years ago. After 8 years of Labour mismanagement, I suspect it will take more time than they suppose to put their pledges into action. I'm making no policy promises at this point, but if elected, I will put into practice the principles we worked on until 2018. My priority will be to get council spending under control. It is only once you control spending that you can choose to spend money wisely. Council tax is probably the most regressive tax we have. Those it hits hardest are those working on modest wages. It takes the greatest proportion of their incomes. The time must come to an end where council tax is used as an ATM for politicians to fund their pet projects. Politics at all levels now is too much about virtue signalling. In what other period of our history would a national political leader struggle to define what a woman was? I entered politics to make changes. So my candidacy is not about protest, it's about delivery. And this is my central message to the people of Newham. It's not about serving one group over another. It's about delivering for all of our residents in the borough. Now, sorry about this, Nigel, but Respect is not perfect. But they are speaking, and they are the only people who have been speaking, to the issues affecting the British public. In Leila, we have a candidate who brings ideas and energy. A candidate who actually likes people and is liked by them. A candidate who can revive London for all Londoners. I look forward to working alongside her. Labour and the Conservatives have failed London. It's time for change. Leila can make that change, Sadiq can't.
Thank you very much. Well, we are taking London very, very seriously. We're taking May the 7th very, very seriously, as you can see. And yes, we will be taking the mayoral election against Sadiq Khan very seriously as well. If I could just ask Leila Cunningham to say a few words to conclude this part of the press conference.
Hi, everyone. When people like Sir Robin Wales and Clive Furnes walk away from their political home, it means something has gone very badly wrong. You don't give up a party that you've spent your life in lightly. Like Clive, you don't step out of retirement into a fight like this unless you know the country and the city that they love cannot go on as it is. And that's what today shows. And look, it's not just Nigel and I saying it. This is a verdict from the core of Labour in London. Right now, we are living through a rape epidemic, knife crime epidemic, theft epidemic. Rent is crushing families. Young people are locked out of home ownership. High streets are hollowed out, full of vape shops and American candy shops. Streets are dirty, graffiti on the walls, public services are failing. And while all that is happening, and I think this is what really makes people angry in London, as their lives get harder, they're faced with councils that serve their own interests and ideology. Councils pass motions about biodiversity, climate emergency, or distant international causes, but fundamentally they stop asking the basic questions. Does what we do make the life better, safer, and more affordable for the people we serve? And the answer across London right now is no. Londoners feel written off. Why not? I mean, take the example of sanctuary boroughs in London. The most expensive city in the country to live in is now a de facto sanctuary city. 15 boroughs in London, Westminster included right here, one of the second most expensive boroughs to live in, has declared themselves sanctuary. It means councils are organising their policies around supporting migrants and asylum seekers, creating programmes, funding services, and planning housing with them as a priority group. And you know what that means? London now houses some of the largest numbers of asylum seekers in the country, while families stood on waiting lists for years, and their children, my children, priced out of their own city. Meanwhile, veterans who served this country are sleeping rough on the streets of the capital, in shop doorways, while people who arrived yesterday are placed in hotels or moved into housing. We think it's a disgrace. And veterans who serve this country should never be sleeping on the pavements while councils boast about how welcoming they are. British children should not be priced out of their own city while subsidising accommodation for foreigners in one of the most expensive cities on earth. That will stop under reform. Reform councils will end sanctuary politics. We will no longer operate as a de facto sanctuary city, and council policy will be prioritise British citizens, veterans, and those with strong local connections. We will restore priority in social housing. Because if a country cannot look after its own, it has no business pretending to be anyone else's sanctuary. We'll end the war on motorists. Low traffic neighbourhoods are the perfect example of what I mentioned earlier, ideology over people. Nobody asked working parents on the school run, carers, tradesmen. Schemes were dumped on communities, roads were blocked and concerns totally ignored, and anyone who needs the car to live a normal life was treated as a problem to be punished. We recognise something very simple at Reform. Cars are essential for millions of people, for work, for caring, for family, even, dare I say it, for having a bit of fun. And Reform councils will remove LTNs. We will end the culture of taxing and fining people just for going about their daily lives. And as mayor, I will abolish ULEZ. See, Londoners will no longer be treated as criminals for driving to work. Reform councils will stop declaring climate emergency, and we will declare safety and affordability emergency, because that's what people are living through. Safety, housing, clean streets. As Robin said, the cost of living. These are the basics, and these will be our priorities in London. And it means treating safety and affordability as the central test of every decision, not an afterthought. And it means remembering, as Robin said, and Clive said, that public money is not the council's money, it's the taxpayers' money. And we will never, ever run councils, as they have been, as vanity projects. We will run them as services. And this is why these defections matter, actually, because Robin and Clive have done this in Newham before successfully. And they watched how Labour has catastrophically failed London and concluded that Labour is actually part of the problem and is no longer the solution. And that's why they're joining Reform, because they want to change the direction of the city, not manage the status quo that has failed. For too long, you see, we believe London has been run by a closed political system, where the same parties pass power back and forth. They defend the same policies and quietly prop each other up. One side governs, the other complains, and nothing fundamentally changes. Crime rises and goes unpunished. Motorists are punished instead. Housing becomes more affordable. Asylum hotels multiply. High streets decline, and yet the policies barely move an inch. That is not real political competition. It's a comfortable arrangement where failure is recycled. Reform is different because we are actually not invested in preserving that system. We're not here to protect the old consensus that created this problem. We are here to break it. Because London and the country doesn't need another manager of the status quo. It needs change, and the only party led by Nigel will deliver that change, because for decades, Nigel has done something quite rare in British politics. When the establishment closed ranks to defend the status quo, he stood with the public who were ignored by it. He has always said plainly what millions of ordinary people were thinking, but were told not to say it. And that's why we keep topping the polls. Because Nigel has spent his political life standing up with the silent majority, not with the system that constantly tries to silence them. So I'll end with this. We won't fix everything overnight. What we will do is change direction. From ideology to service, from failure to recovery, and finally to a London that works for Londoners, not just politicians. And Clive and Robin show that even Labour's own people now accept the truth. Labour will never fix the problems it created, and they have chosen to back the only party that will. And that's why today is yet another bad day for Labour, but a great day for us in London. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And one of those policy areas that really interested me was the fact that you've put into place active stop and search against all the people screaming at you, and managed to reduce knife crime in the borough by 2/3. And we want to see a lot more of that across not just London, but frankly every city in the UK. Right, we have a mass of questions as ever, starting with Catherine Forster, GB News.
Thank you, Catherine Forster, GB News. Donald Trump said that the Prime Minister is...
He's good at making the news, isn't he? He really is.
He really is no Churchill. He also referred to Diego Garcia as a stupid little island. What do you make of those comments? And you're very keen on British sovereignty. surely there has to be times at which we can say no to an American president. And also, if I could ask Sir Robin and Clive, you've defected from Labour to Reform. You've said that they've abandoned sort of British working class people. Who do you feel that the Labour Party is for now? Thank you.
OK, I'll start with this. Well, to say he's no Churchill is quite an understatement, really, I would have thought. I mean, the man has dithered, he's all over the place, he's not a leader, he's a follower. His performance has been abject over the course of the last few days, added to which we haven't even got a Royal Navy that's serviceable anymore. So I'm not surprised he said what he said. Look, there are times to say no to the Americans, absolutely. You know, we should have said no a couple of times in the last 25 years. And of course, because Saddam Hussein didn't pose any direct threat to this country, they had to invent a threat. I would argue in the case of Iran, since the 7th of October, this country has fundamentally changed as a result of terrorism funded by Iran. And frankly, if this operation stops Iran getting a nuclear weapon, it would have been worth it. And I believe that very, very strongly. I'm normally incredibly nervous about intervening in foreign wars. I believe this is the right one. As far as Diego Garcia is concerned, well, yeah, I think the little island he talked about was another one, actually, not Diego Garcia. But his geography, Trump's geography on the Chagos Islands is not perhaps fully up to speed. Diego Garcia has suddenly become incredibly important. The fact that a British Prime Minister said no, and that 2-man planes had to fly 37-hour round trips, think about that, from Missouri to complete their missions is why he's so upset. What I would also point out, Catherine, overnight there's been a missive from the Mauritian Prime Minister in which he says that he believes America's actions are against international law, and he calls for an immediate ceasefire. And what that tells you is if the handover of the sovereignty of the Chagos Islands, including Diego Garcia, was to go ahead, an American president would need to ask a heavily Chinese-influenced Mauritian Prime Minister for permission, and it's perfectly clear that even after Starmer says yes, Mauritius are saying ceasefire, stop, no. And I think that will be the final nail in the coffin. You know, the government have made it clear all along that they do need American agreement. Jonathan Powell did a great job. He lied his way around Washington for month after month after month, saying there was a legal imperative for us to do this when it was never, ever true. Jack Elsom, The Sun. Sorry, Labour Party. Sorry. I apologise.
Well, you did say you probably get more questions about... because there's stuff happening there. Yeah, quite a lot. Just interesting, Nigel's answer. Of course, you remember that the Labour Party in 1945 joined NATO, got nuclear weapons, went into Korea. So actually, I don't think we have defected from Labour. We're clear about this. We stand where we stood. We stand on the Enlightenment values, and the Labour Party has left us. And we've joined the party that we think represents working people. And that's one of the reasons we come to reform. Who does Labour represent? It represents the 70,000 plus people earning more than £70,000 plus, which is where they get more votes from that group than any other party. That is not the Labour Party I joined in 1970. Long time ago. Work out my age. A lot of CDs, the biggest number of CDs is now with reform. And one of the things we wanted to say to Labour voters out there, do not be confused. The people, the class that is now running our society, we call it the patrician class, we call it the mangoes, call it the lanyard class, call it anything you want, but people who think they have the right to do whatever they want with the taxes they raise, and who cares, and they're always right because they believe that they are bound to be cleverer than the unwashed who dared to vote for Brexit. I tell you, that was done. By the way, we're Remainers. We voted Remain. But when the British people voted to leave, we thought, well, the bosses have spoken.
Yeah.
We have to do what the bosses tell us. And that's the arrogance of the Labour Party and the Tories and the Greens and the Liberals. They don't think that's important. And one of the great things about reform is it's going to stop the safe seats. And people have sat there for years and years and years and not given a toss about the British people. So that's what I think the Labour Party represents. Now, it's been a slow process, but in terms of the Labour Party switch. But you saw with Emily Thornberry, you saw that tweet. That was outrageous. Those are working class. I don't know what the guy who had the England flag in the van was like, but he probably worked hard for his family. He probably went out and earned a living. He probably went and... We hope he paid his taxes. We'd encourage him to. So that's what the Labour Party represent today, and that's why we haven't defected. We've looked and said this party is not the party for working people. And we want to try and send that message to Labour people. Come over, it's the right thing to do.
Thank you. Jack Elson, The Sun newspaper.
Thank you very much. Nigel, you've always been a fan of proportional representation. The last MRP a few months ago showed that Reform would likely win a majority under first past the post. But under PR, what would look like most certainly is a rainbow coalition of progressive parties in current polling. Are you still a fan of proportional representation? And if you were in government, would you initiate it? And then quickly, are these the Labour defectors who you teased a few months ago? And if not, who was it?
No, there's some of them. There's some of them.
And then chaps,
we are talking to a number of Labour figures. What is particularly pertinent about these two guys is their record in government in London as we approach the London election. There are other Labour figures we're talking to, and you will see them over the course of the next weeks and months.
Can I just ask Robin and Clive, large parts of your speeches were about integration in areas like Newham. If you did get back into power there, specifically, what would you do about integration?
Easy answer to that. He's going to be in power after the election.
Basically, anybody who is lawfully here, who is a British citizen, is a British citizen. Yeah. A British citizen is not determined, Britain's citizenship is not determined by the colour of the skin or the name they use to worship God. Anybody who is here legally is a British citizen and entitled to the full support of the British state. Now, I actually am fairly sympathetic towards refugees, not to people who are seeking a better life at the expense of people in Britain. That's a separate matter. But no, I would like people to be part of one country, one community. I delight in the different colours in here, the different colours of people, the different cuisines, the different clothing. I mean, that is all good for me. I mean, I think that's a very positive. The only thing that needs to be there to unify us is that if we are British, we support Britain. This is our home, and this is the place that we pledge our allegiance to. We share that together.
Thank you. Well, we could talk about proportional representation, Jack. We could talk about the need for House of Lords, urgent need for House of Lords reform. But until we have elections that aren't being corrupted, I think we should perhaps leave those debates for later. We have to have free and fair, open, honest elections that people trust. I have been, in the political sphere, pretty much a lone voice for over a decade, talking about the abuse of the postal vote system. And the extraordinary thing is, we've seen it in Tower Hamlets. We've seen it in Birmingham. Even as long ago as 2004, a High Court judge said a borough in Birmingham had behaved like a banana republic. Yet despite this, nothing has changed. And why has nothing changed? Because it suited the Labour Party. I'm being really honest and cynical. The mass harvesting of postal votes in communities where women probably never even get to see the ballot paper is something that has gone. I've tried to challenge it. I've never succeeded. The reason this is now a debate is because Democracy Volunteers are a third party. They're actually Lib Dems that make up the bulk of it. And what they saw was family voting, right? And that is literally people going into the polling booth, somebody overseeing how everyone votes, and then recording it on the mobile phone to send back to say you've done what you were told to do. That's why the lid has been lifted on this. I tried like crazy with the Conservatives during their time in government to say, clean up our democracy. Oh, well, old boy, we were never going to win Bradford anyway, and it's jolly useful for us in the rural areas. You know, it's literally been an impossible debate to have, and I've been accused of sour grapes again and again and again, and I promise you I'm not wrong about this. Wholesale reform. And you know what? The French don't get much right, but they get voting right. There, they get voting right. Yeah. You can have a proxy, a postal, but you have to have a reason.
Yes.
And that reason is I'm on holiday.
Yeah.
That reason is I'm 97 in a wheelchair. That reason is I'm serving abroad. Postal votes, proxy votes, should never make up more than 2% of the total turnout in an election. Even in the English counties, in the rural English counties last year, on May the 1st, postal votes made up 34% of the turnout. And so what is happening is elections are being determined weeks before polling day, when all the electorate don't have the same level of information. Am I committed to House of Lords reform? Yes. Do I think an element of AV plus in our system that meant significant minority views would get some representation in Westminster? Yes, I do think all of those things. But first, we have to bring back the integrity, the honesty of our electoral system. Thank you. Peter Schnettbangers from The Telegraph.
Thank you, Nigel. Two questions. One, if you were in Sir Keir's shoes right now, how would you repair the special relationship? And I'll ask the second quickly. It's slightly different. In terms of family voting, do you think that there are councils or councillors in May that might not win, reform councillors, because of the practice? And I know you've spoken a lot about postal votes, but in the ballot stations themselves, or the polling stations, how would you tackle that practice, or what do you want to see change?
Very easy. Make sure that councils and returning officers in polling stations obey the very specific legislation. You talked about the Charters beginning this principle, but actually there's a piece of legislation from 2023 that is absolutely explicit on this point. And so one of the things police officers could do on polling day is to go around polling stations to make sure that the law is being obeyed. I'm going to let you into a secret as to why family voting has hit the fore. This by-election was called at very, very short notice. The postal votes were landing on mats within 6 or 7 days. The Green Party did not have time to mobilise for the postal vote, and so the postal vote came in very much in Labour's favour. It's why they were talking so bullishly to the lobby. It's why Keir Starmer went to visit. The Greens, the pro-Gaza Greens, got mobilised that little bit later, and that's where the panic was. And the panic happened because the men were told at the mosque, drag the whole family down on polling day, get them to vote, and let's see evidence that you've done it. That is the true story of what happened in Gorton and Denton last week. It's the first time I've said it in public, but I promise you it's absolutely true. If I was Keir Starmer, what would I do to mend the relationship with Donald Trump? I think that ship has sailed. I don't think there's any chance, and I think that relationship's been fraying for quite a long time. He did his absolute best with Trump, and to some extent, Starmer did his best the other way around too. You know, Trump has a natural love of this country, and of course we shouldn't agree with every single thing the American president says or does. We don't. But I do think the relationship is broken, and without doubt, the worst it's been for almost exactly 70 years. Let's go to Aaron Newbury from the Daily Express.
Sir Robin, you've been a Labour member since the 1970s through multiple Labour governments, including Blair, Brown and now Sir Keir Starmer, all of whom saw taxes go up, expanded the welfare state and increased immigration. Throughout all of that, you've stayed loyal, so why are you only discovering your objections now? And Mr Furnes, this month, Zia Youssef said that reform would restore Britain's Christian heritage. In 2014, when David Cameron, then Prime Minister, said the same thing, you accused him of dog whistle politics and said that he was trying to assert a religious hegemony. Do you stand by that claim?
Did I take that?
Yeah, far. Go on, chaps. It's all
Okay.
over to you.
Taking the question of raising taxes. I'm not against raising taxes and spending them in good things. In fact, without it, we wouldn't have the society we've got. In the very good book that Clive and I have written, and I recommend this to everybody here, available in all good bookshops and Amazon. That was a joke Clive told me. I thought, all good bookshop. We make the point about we believe that our society is better. You need to generate wealth, but Social Democrats have then got involved and said, look, we have to spend some money on some good things and do the right thing by British people. Now, I think that worked very well for a while. I think we forget with Blair that the first 5 or 6 years he spent there, he was driving up the standard of public service. And when he was putting money into health service, it was actually making a difference. They then got into a quagmire of quantifications, nice quote from somebody, that he got too many PIs instead of focusing on a few, and that's what we say, they lost their way. We were also lucky in some respects. The Chinese were producing lots of goods at the time, producing lots of cheap goods, so there was a good time. After that, it started to go horribly wrong. And we've argued at all points in the Labour Party, don't just tax, you have to be more efficient in the services that you do. And that's what we did. And I'm happy I could sit here for the next 15 minutes and explain to you how we did the services. What you should do when a politician tells you something is don't ask them what they're going to do. Ask them how they're going to do it. You're going to stop the small boats. Explain in detail how you're going to do that and why you think that. Like telling the French, don't let people come across that you don't want to have in your country. It's incentives are what matter. So we argued that substantially in the party. When we lost in 2018, and I stood and I had 500, the Corbynites had 250, and there were 600 Muslims from the mosques. They came and talked to me, said, will you do a deal? And I said, no chance, not interested. Then we've seen what happens when you don't focus on the services and the quality of the services. So it's been a journey, and it's hard to walk away. I always said, you're having a breakup. It's you've suffered the domestic violence. You should spend a little time thinking about what you do, which is why we left the party and then took time to think about reform and talked reform for a long time. So I think I can justify it. Maybe we should have gone quicker. Mm-hmm. Maybe we've gone a bit slow. But we still believe that. But what we've seen increasingly is an arrogance in the spend of public money and no attempt to haul it in. And the Labour MPs ain't going to allow anything like that to happen.
And it's worth pointing out, you were a Labour candidate as recently as 2024 in Suffolk. I
stood as the Police and Crime Commissioner for the Labour Party, and if Reform had stood, I'd have won. So I just want to say the better about that. And if you look at what my literature says, it was crack down on crime. And when Nigel was talking about the 2/3 reduction in night crime, that was because we had a great borough commander who said, I'm going to be a police officer here. And we mentioned him in the book as well, because he wanted, he grew up in Newham. He wanted to improve the streets in Newham, and working with him was brilliant. He wanted to do the right thing. We then paid for 40 police officers, who we then tasked together. We closed more brothels than the Met Central Command. We prosecuted more landlords than the rest of the country put together. We said we'll not put up with bad behaviour. That's why we got 80% satisfaction. One of the reasons.
Very good answer.
Could you just repeat what I said in whenever it was?
So it was said in an interview in the Newham Recorder in 2014.
Yeah.
It's a long time.
At one level, Mr Cameron is engaging in dog-whistle politics. The problem with his assertion is that it's coded in a desire to assert a religious agenda.
Okay. Right. Context is everything. Why do you say it? When Zia says it, he's talking about the history of this country. He's saying the rich traditions that come. I am firmly within the Judeo-Christian tradition, and I am glad that it's part of our history. You can twist that and use that to exclude people. And that's what I think I was probably speaking about.
Yeah, and you look at us as a party, we firmly adhere to that, but we've got people of all faiths within our party, some indeed in very prominent positions. David Lynch, Press Association.
Thanks very much, Mr Farage. Just wanted to ask about some comments that Danny Kruger made to the House magazine recently. In an interview with our magazine, he said that reform could have a limited but important role in undoing elements of the sexual revolution. I think he was specifically talking about pro-natalist policy. But, I mean, other elements of the sexual revolution include abortion rights, contraception, LGBT rights. Can we expect any rolling back of any of these areas under a reform government?
No. But I do believe in freedom of the individual, you know, on issues like abortion. I don't think these things should ever be party political issues. It should be issues of conscience. Danny is, you know, somebody of a very deep Christian faith, nothing wrong with that, and he believes in what he believes in very strongly. But it doesn't mean it's party policy. It doesn't mean we'd implement it directly. You know, I think, you know, the sexual revolution we're quite keen to talk about in London is the fact we've been hiding, willfully hiding, the grooming gang scandal in our capital city.
Yes.
And you'll hear a lot more from us on that over the course of the next few months.
Can I just point out about the sexual revolution in London? So, you know, over 777 rapes were recorded in January alone in London. And just to put that in perspective, only 6% of rapes end up in a charge in London. And that's the kind of revolution we're talking about, is rape will be taken seriously in a London reform. And when the mayor talks about violent crimes, he doesn't even include rape. Women have been sidelined, and sexual assault against women, and you see it in the rape gang cover-up that we believe is prevalent in London but has been covered up, and in terms of rape charges. And that's something that we're going to take very, very seriously.
Thank you. Samara Gill, Talk TV.
Thank you. Sir Robin and Clive, what did Sadiq Khan do that made you finally think it's time to defect? And Nigel, the Prime Minister went to an iftar event last night in Westminster Hall and spoke about justice and security in Palestine. Was that the right place for a political message about the Middle East, given the timings?
I don't think Sadiq Khan made us leave the Labour Party. I think the Labour Party made us leave the Labour Party. Sadiq is pretty... I have a saying, which is that Ken Livingstone is not the worst mayor we've ever had. Be honest, Boris Johnson was a very good mayor because he had very, very good people around him. It's a good example. Great listening to Leila. When she talks about it, she's going to get good people, the best you can. I mean, you can speak for yourself, Leila, I know you can, but it's just so refreshing to hear somebody say, I'm not going to do it all, but I know somebody who can, and that's what Boris did. Sadiq didn't. He's got the way he runs things. I'm not going into detail, but just look at the housing record, right? And part of that, I know people say it's the planning. Yeah, planning's a mess. But if you're going to demand too much for affordable housing, developers are going to say, I'm not going to do it. The developers have walked away. I talked to lots of developers. We built a lot of housing in Newham. We were very keen on it. We knew that developers had to make a profit. I mean, they may be terrible people making a profit, but they had to get something out of it. And we were very keen. We were third for affordable homes and second for building. But when the developers see there's no money in it, they'll walk away. Yeah, I'm sorry, they just won't build. And if you don't build housing... I remember talking to a sixth form, and I said, where are the economists? I said, what happens if you build a lot more houses to rent? And they went, well, supply and demand, rents will go down or be held. So build the damn things. But Sadiq doesn't do that. He doesn't do anything but virtue signal all the stuff he does. He is... People will tell you privately, if you go and talk to them privately, go and ask any of the leaders, go and ask any of the developers. Of course, they can't say it publicly because you don't want to get on the wrong side of the mayor. He is just thoroughly awful. Sorry, he just is.
Very straightforward, wasn't it?
Can I have a shot?
Please.
Yeah. Thank you. So, like Robin, Sadiq wasn't the reason I left, but my disillusionment with him as an individual and a politician, I think, was summed up in his response to a question about grooming gangs in London.
Sorry. Yeah.
His contempt and arrogance in response to that question on an issue. The issue is one that actually eats at the very heart of every parent. His arrogance towards that was, I think, the final nail in the coffin.
Can I just say one thing on the grooming gangs is we've heard from I've read victims' accounts, and they were told they were driven to London. There were hundreds of men, and they were never asked about the men in London. Others were driven from the north to London to be gang raped overnight in a house because their abuser owed someone in London. And this is across the years, and the whole time the mayor would look and answer questions, and Sir Mark Riley, and say that they didn't exist in London. And it's only after public pressure that they've said that they're going to review 9,000 cases. And we don't feel that they're going to get to the bottom of it. A friend of mine's daughter actually was very drunk in the park, and she was surprised because social services called her after and said, listen, what we're really worried about are grooming gangs in London. And my friend said, well, I was told that didn't exist in London. And she said, oh, no, they're very prevalent. So social services even are very aware that they are in London. And we do worry about this so-called inquiry because it is chaired by a Labour peer who you have to kind of assume is there to protect the Labour Party. It could have been chaired by an independent judge, but they chose not to go down that way. And we fear that justice will not be served. And a major part of, if I do win, is to really have a reckoning for all those that not only abused girls in this city. I mean, my girls are of the age that they would be susceptible to that, but also anyone who covered it up. And, you know, we won't be here to play nice. We're here, as I said before, there'll be a reckoning for all those in power or not who covered it up.
Yeah, you would have thought right at this moment in time it was somewhat inappropriate for the Prime Minister to attend an event like that last night, but it tells you everything you need to know. Whatever Shabana Mahmood says or does, and by the way, much of it I think is common sense and right in many, many ways. Yeah. I mean, I genuinely do if she's allowed to deliver it. But whatever she may say, I have little doubt that the Labour Party will go into a bidding war for the inner city vote. And it's particularly, we always say Muslim, it's not. No, yeah. It's Pakistani Kashmir.
Yes.
You know, that's actually, let's just, and Bangladesh too. No, but let's just call it what it is. And there's going to be a bidding war between Labour and the Greens, who can appease that group the most. And that is where our politics is going, because the Labour Party knows that on the numbers, they might have lost 4 seats at the last election, or 5 if you include Jezza. They could lose between 30 and 50 at the next election because of the density of population of those communities and the lack of integration, frankly, of those communities, but also because of the huge numbers of teenagers in those communities. You reduce the vote to 16 in some of those inner city areas, it's going to make a material difference. So I'm afraid to say that I think the concerns Labour have about this vote that they've taken for granted will now play out, with Labour moving further and further and further towards the Helensky position, if we can call it that.
Can I just add to Nigel's thing? So what we've seen in London is refugees do go to the top of the housing list because they are deemed most in need, as legislation requires. And as a result, they have been put into areas where they've dominated those areas. And as we all know, that immigration in small numbers, people integrate. But when you dominate an area, you tend to dominate. And they do dominate the areas that they're really put in. And that is the problem when you prioritise refugees for social housing. And I've been told I'd be a good candidate because I'm a Muslim in London and only a Muslim can win London. And I find that is a fundamental failure of our country. The fact that people think only a Muslim person can win as a mayor in the capital of the United Kingdom. And that, to me, shows how mass migration has been done completely wrong. That only someone of a particular religion that doesn't match the intrinsic religion of the country can win the capital of it.
And worth remembering that vast numbers, the biggest amount of numbers, of course, came in the last few years. The Boris wave, is having enormous consequences for our communities, literally everywhere. Mauricio Alencar from City AM.
Hi, thanks for this. So, in response to the Middle Eastern crisis, oil prices have surged, gas prices have surged. Is the cost of inflation, cost of living price worth paying to topple the Iranian regime, in your view? And just for Ms Cunningham, are affordable housing targets stifling house building in London? Would you scrap them? And should the mayor take a more interventionist approach in green lighting developments?
Yeah, I mean, look, you know, I'm a former commodities trader. I'm used to spikes in oil prices and coffee prices or whatever else it may be. I think the most significant development overnight for you guys at City AM is what is happening with Lloyd's of London. You know, for 300 years, that has been the global insurance market for shipping, including in time of war. And it's slightly grey as to whether the 7 big underwriting providers whacked the prices up to levels that were simply ridiculous, or whether even some contracts got cancelled, I don't know. But what Trump has done, or Besant, I suppose, probably in a sense has done overnight, is very, very shrewd, because they're going to provide reasonably priced insurance for all shipping to go through the Straits of Hormuz, because Trump too would be terrified of an oil price that rose and sustained that rise. His biggest pitch to American voters as the midterms comes up is it's costing you $1.50 less per gallon to fill up the car with gas. So that's why they've done what they've done overnight. But for you guys, I'd love to find out. I want to read tomorrow, what is the truth? You know, has Lloyd's of London, after 300 years, shot itself in the foot or not?
Yeah, I mean, we have a housing crisis in London. We have 20, 30, 40-year-olds who don't own a home, can't own a home, and potentially never will, and a state really that can't provide for it. And it is a demand and supply issue. You know, we have had mass migration into London, and not enough housing has been built, but it's also a supply issue. You know, many councils are, as Nigel said, they punish developers. You know, developers come with a product that is desperately needed, and what you have is the councils and the mayor punish them with excessive regulation, excessive demands. Like Robin said, they're in it to make money, and if they don't, they're not going to do it. And I speak to loads of developers. And the problem is that when you have excessive regulation, it's the big developers that can absorb that cost. And so you create a monopoly at the top, and you price out all the good, you know, young, dynamic, smaller companies that really want to deliver a good service. And so we want to see less regulation, less punishment of developers, and more housing going up. And just on the point of the mayor, I mean, he's massively underspent on the grant he gets from the government to build, and he hasn't even reached, you know, a fraction of the target he said he would. And you know what? That's a betrayal to the young people, and I want young people in London to know that it is due to decisions made at a council and at a mayor level that they are finding it hard not only to rent but to buy a house, and that's got to change.
Lucy White, Bloomberg.
Thank you. I wanted to ask to Clive and Sir Robin, you said that you were both Remainers. Yes. Can I ask why you were so keen to recognise the result of the Brexit referendum, but you're not so keen to recognise the results of the Gorton and Denton election? And both of you talk about working people and your admiration for Labour as you knew it, the backing that gave to working people. How does Reform's plans to repeal the Employment Rights Act sit with you, given the protection that gives to people on 0 hours contract? 0 hours contracts and fire and rehire.
Okay. No, I don't understand that. I recognise the Gorton by-election result. The result, right? Now, there were some issues there, and we have to address those issues. And interestingly, all the things that Nigel says, I had a borough with a third was Muslim, and we were next door to Tower Hamlets, and I can tell you now, our attitude to it was very different from Tower Hamlets, and I saw what happened in Tower Hamlets, and I saw the corruption in Tower Hamlets, and we fought absolutely clearly. We had people trying to infiltrate the Labour Party, and we blocked them, and we said, we're not having it. I had people offering to send me pictures of their ballot paper, and I said, don't you bloody dare, it's illegal, I don't want anything to do with that. You vote or don't vote, it's your choice. So no, I recognise the Gorton by-election, but I also recognise Brexit. The people spoke. I mean, we thought they were, I have to tell you, we were close to being. It was a hold your nose type stuff. And I may have been wrong. Nigel.
A bit like Boris Johnson. He wasn't sure either.
No, we weren't in the we'll decide which suits us best camp. We were in the we'll make a decision. It was a hard one. But the people spoke. And I'm sorry, I'm a big fan of democracy. We're big fans of the Enlightenment values. So we think that's right. As for the Employment Rights Act, there's been some interesting research in America. If you call a bill or an act by a good name, like the act that will bring lots of good stuff, there's a bounce in the support for that act. Employment Rights Act is nothing of the bloody sort. The Employment Rights Act is a central government trying to impose a one-size-fits-all to all sorts of things across the country. It's going to cost business lots of money, which means less jobs, which I'll come back again and say that's why I joined. I remember jobs were important to us. I grew up in a trade union town, right? We had a lot of trade unions. We were very clear about that. So we were clear that we're doing it. Just because you call an act employment's right doesn't mean that. Now, some of the stuff on trade unions I have a little sympathy for, because I believe these people should have the right to strike and get the chance to... Some of it's stupid, but the actual Employment Rights Act and the detail, it's the detail of it. The devil's always in the detail. It's a nonsense act. It isn't doing anything for lots of people. It will add cost to business, but that won't matter to big business because they'll be able to absorb it. Yeah. And it won't matter, by the way, to public service because they'll absorb it, like they did when they put up the tax, the employer's national insurance contribution. They gave a sum of money to the councils to pay for it. Yeah, I'm sorry. We've got to do something. We believe you need growth, and then we can tax the growth, but we need the growth first, and we're not getting it. So, nah.
Yeah. No, I'll
sorry. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, look, nobody on the Labour front bench has ever set up a small business. Precious few in the Conservatives have ever set up a small business. They don't know what it's like to make monthly payroll. I do. Yeah. I do. And there are 5.7 million small businesses out there, and you make legislation. Well, all right, Unilever can enforce the legislation. Yeah. But it's the same set of rules, for a 1 or 2 person business down the road, and this puts them off employing people. Yeah. And it puts them off giving young people a chance. It's counterproductive. Henry Riley, LBC.
Thank you very much, Henry Riley from LBC. Tomorrow marks the 80th anniversary of the special relationship with Winston Churchill and President Truman. On a sort of similar theme to some of the other questions, I wondered how you felt Winston Churchill would have handled the situation with regards to Iran, and your overall assessment of, again, Donald Trump's comments that Catherine referenced. And again, Mr Farage, if I could ask you about postal voting, you spoke about it again there. It was reported that at the last election you voted by post. I mean,
so?
Well, I'm saying, should politicians set an example to get more people voting in person?
I did vote by post at the last election, although I think I did actually turn up at the polling station with the ballot. So I received my postal vote. But I did actually deliver it on the day. But whatever. Look, this was all sold as convenience. It's so much more convenient to have a postal vote. But I repeat the point that people are voting weeks before election day. They haven't seen the whole argument play out. And it's open. And by the way, it's not just open to fraud, abuse and intimidation within ethnic communities. Actually, I have watched a postman in a northern town on polling day delivering postal votes, and a party activist following 100 yards down the street. Hello, Mrs. Smith, I've come to collect your postal vote. Now, provided that person doesn't physically touch the ballot paper, they're still acting within the law. But even that has the potential to be intimidatory. There is no form of postal voting, mass postal voting, that has been put in place anywhere in the world that is not open to massive, massive down. The special relationship, we've had our ups and downs. Suez was a big down. You could argue that saying no to Vietnam was a difficult moment. So we have our ups and downs. We're not always going to agree. But I think you've seen, over the course of the last few weeks and months, a deteriorating relationship between the Prime Minister and the President. And I have to say, I never thought it would work. Starmer is just not the kind of guy that can bowl into the Oval Office and speak to Donald Trump face to face. And I think the choice of ambassador, let's just not forget, what has happened post-Mandels is also pretty embarrassing for pretty much everyone involved. I mean, Trump's going to be saying to himself, isn't he, why did they send me this guy? If he was that compromised and had been kicked out of British politics times before, what was Keir thinking, sending me this guy that I was due to have trusted conversations with? I do not believe the relationship between Trump and Starmer will improve. It'll have to wait for the next Prime Minister, whenever that is.
And what of Winston Churchill, sorry? How...
Winston Churchill was terrified by extremism, utterly terrified by extremism. He physically fought against extremism in 1897, and he'd seen that fanaticism, and it's why when the National Socialists took power in 1933, he was almost alone in British politicians in seeing the danger. He'd seen extremism before. He saw it again with National Socialism and the Nazis. And I do not for a moment believe that Winston Churchill would have much support for a regime that publicly executes thousands of people. Did you know they'd publicly executed 5,000 gays? Just as one example of a group of people that they hang from cranes. So, yeah, I think Churchill would have been very much in favour. As I repeat, there are risks with any form of military action. But to me, the big win is if we stop them developing a nuclear weapon, this will be a success. That is my view. Okay. Anna Gross, Financial Times.
You have quite a diverse coalition now, I think, as this press conference shows, and not everyone agrees on every topic.
I hope not.
One of the biggest problems I think that the Labour government has faced is, obviously civil service has been a bit of a blocker, international law also a bit of a blocker, but I think also just dissent from their own MPs, huge rebellions that have frustrated their efforts to get pretty much any of the major things that they've wanted to get done. Do you have a strategy for dealing with dissent from your own? Your number of MPs and council leaders is about to grow probably quite a lot. How will Reform deal with dissent and disagreement from its own MPs and council leaders and councillors?
Well, I'm a great believer, and I did mention this earlier, I'm a great believer that people have issues of conscience. Yeah. In my many long years leading groups in the European Parliament, there'd be certain votes, and MEPs would come to me and say, Nigel, I'm not with you on this. I feel quite strongly. Fine. So I have no trouble with dissent. What I struggle with is disloyalty. Yeah. And I think they're two very, very different things. Yes, of course we can argue about things, and we will argue about things, and there will be some disagreements. But I think what brings us together is very, very strong, and that is the genuine belief that Britain is broken, that London is broken, that we need something fundamental, not fiddling around the edges, to change things. So I think, and those really big areas, crime, community, all of those things, bring integrity of the election system. It may be a smaller one, but still very important. So yeah, dissent I can put up with, disloyalty I can't, and I've always been like that. And you'll find in this office, you'll find people that have worked with me for 10 years, 12 years, 20 years. There's even one guy who works here a couple of days a week who's worked for me for 30 years. So I've formed great long-term relationships with people. They certainly don't have to agree with everything I say, but if they're disloyal about me, well, they tend to disappear quite quickly. A couple more. Ellie Hodges, New Culture Forum. That's how I work.
Thank you. Nigel, how do you respond to critics who say that by bringing in former Conservative figures and Labour figures as well,
can't win, can I?
you risk losing your identity as an anti-establishment party? And do you even want to be known as an anti-establishment party anymore? And Sir Robin, you mentioned what you call indoctrination in schools. How exactly would you deal with this when in reality you can't really police what teachers say in the classroom? Thank you.
We are anti-establishment in that we think they've led us into a terrible direction and they're not able to face up to the consequences of what they've done. Hence, Kemi, Keir, Britain isn't broken. It jolly well is. We know it, and most of the public do. But being anti-establishment doesn't mean you're just grenade chuckers for the sake of it. We're not standing in these elections to say, come on, let's stick two fingers up. We're standing in these elections to try and blooming win. And when you win, there comes with that a responsibility. I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't have the first clue how to deal with social services and budgets in the London borough of Newham. I wouldn't have a clue. But you know something? These guys do. And I think that is of enormous value to our party, to our mission, to our cause, not just in the London borough of Newham, but actually more broadly across London and other parts of the country too. So you're taking too many Tories. Now you're saying, well, I'm taking too many Labour. I can't win. But we do need experience. We need it at all levels. And I if there are one or two people, on X is full of grenade throwers. X is full of, let's just cause havoc and destruction. And that's not what we're about. We're actually about trying to put at all levels in this country a different type of government with a different set of priorities. And maybe some will say we're old-fashioned, but we actually happen to think that the family matters, community matters, and the country matters. And they're the values that we stand on. That's what we're all about. Last question, Alexandra Topping from The Guardian.
It was indoctrination from...
Oh, sorry, schools, yeah. Well, I think you did it already, actually, but yeah, go on.
No, I'm going to do something I shouldn't do. I'm going to mention somebody who will not thank me for it since I've joined Reform. Nick Gibb did a fantastic job in schools. It was the one thing, the one thing I'll look at the Tories and say, you did a good job there. They did it on phonics, and they wanted to teach knowledge as part of the curriculum. People need to know things, and I'm with that. When I grew up, my history teacher used to make us debate and argue. I used to like that. It was great fun, because free speech is important. That's how you get people to talk about things and explore topics. But you set that by giving them the knowledge that they can then apply. They are being indoctrinated. The kids that are going to university are being indoctrinated, and it needs to stop, because they're being sold a pup, they're being sold a lie by fourth-rate academics who frankly couldn't earn a living outside if they weren't peddling what is actually anti-democratic nonsense. So I think it's very straightforward. You try and give people a knowledge base and then try and encourage them to debate. Free speech. Free speech, that's how it works.
You do tend to say what you think, don't you? Sorry, Alexandra, last question.
Mr Farage,
yes.
According to a Survation poll published in The Guardian today, more than half of Reform UK members believe non-white British citizens born abroad should be deported or encouraged to leave. Do you agree with them?
Yeah,
and on a second point...
Get down the pub at closing time, you can find all sorts of opinions. And it's not a Guardian poll, it's a Hope Not Hate poll, isn't it?
No, it's a Survation poll.
Well, it's sponsored by Hope Not Hate, am I wrong?
No, it was published in
conjunction
with Hope Not Hate. But it's a poll that's been verified by the National Polling Council.
Right, well, I will respond that polling in this country is all over the place, as you well know. We have 6 national polling companies put us on an average of 29.75%, and one polling company where we seem to be collapsing with every week that goes by. YouGov used to be the gold standard. I'm not quite sure what is going on. You can find specific people that will say almost anything in answer to a question. We have been very, very clear where we stand. If people are here illegally, they should be deported. Of that there is no question at all. Operation Restoring Justice makes that clear. But equally, we make clear that there's no single policy that we advocate, that we offer to the public, or we advertise in any way that has any racial or religious motive or objective. Unlike, I mentioned X a moment ago, unlike many on X, who I fear right at this moment in time are taking some of this debate into a very, very dark place. We will not be going there. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, very good. I'm sorry about our meeting. I don't so the next month I can't see. Why don't we push these issues? I know. But also the thing is I haven't really got any. Well, that's right. Yeah. Well, I'll keep you updated. Let me know when you're around.